My brother Ray came to visit me from Chicago and found my house empty, completely empty. There were no furniture, no food in the pantry, nothing. He looked at me, his eyes filling with tears, and asked, "Sis, why are you starving yourself when you have a pension of $8,000 a month?" Before I could answer, Marcus walked out of his room, crossed his arms, and declared with a proud smile, "I give all her money to my wife. She manages it better than Mom." The silence that followed was deafening. Ray stood still, looking at my son as if he were a stranger. Then, very slowly, he took off his coat, calmly folded it, and what he did next left Marcus completely paralyzed. But to understand how we got to that moment, I have to tell you my story from the beginning. My name is Vivian, but everyone calls me Viv, and I'm 69 years old. All my life, I worked as a registered nurse at Midtown Community Hospital. That was 42 years of night shifts, sleep-stealing emergencies, and patients who cried in my arms. 42 years of giving my life to save other lives. My husband, Richard, passed away 11 years ago from a massive heart attack. It was so sudden, there was no time for goodbyes. That morning, before heading to work, he kissed me on the forehead and said, "I love you, Viv." I never imagined those would be his last words. The pain of losing him was so deep I thought I wouldn't survive, but I had one reason to keep going. Marcus, our only son. He became the center of my universe. Everything I did, every extra hour I worked, every sacrifice I made was for him. So he could have a good education, so he wouldn't lack anything, so he could fulfill his dreams. Marcus grew up a cheerful and affectionate child. I remember when he was 8 years old, he'd wait up for me after my night shifts just to give me a hug. "Mommy, you're the best nurse in the world," he'd tell me with that sweet voice that melted my heart. I saw him graduate from a state university with honors. He studied business administration, and I was so proud of him. I attended his graduation ceremony in my hospital scrubs because I came straight from an 18-hour shift, but I didn't care. Seeing my son receive that diploma was my greatest reward. Afterward, he landed a good job at a logistics firm. Everything seemed perfect. My son was a successful, responsible man with a future, or so I believed. 3 years ago, Marcus met Tiffany at a business conference. She worked in the marketing department of a competing company. She was an elegant woman, always impeccably dressed, with the kind of self-assurance that demands respect. When Marcus introduced her to me, I noticed something in her eyes that I couldn't quite place at the time, a calculating coldness behind her perfect smile. "So lovely to finally meet you, Mrs. Jenkins," she said softly, extending her hand. "Marcus has told me so much about you." She was wearing an ivory dress that probably cost more than my monthly nursing salary. I tried to be kind, to give her the benefit of the doubt. After all, she was the woman who had won my son's heart. They married 6 months later in a small but elegant ceremony. I paid half the cost of the wedding with my savings because I wanted Marcus to have the special day he deserved. Tiffany didn't have any close family. She said her parents had passed away and that she was an only child. I felt sorry for her. I thought maybe her coldness was just armor to protect herself from loneliness. I tried to reach out, to be the mother she never had. The first few months seemed happy. Marcus came to visit every week. Sometimes he brought Tiffany. We'd share Sunday dinner, and he'd tell me about his work, his plans, his dreams. "Mom, I'm going to give you grandkids soon," he promised one afternoon while helping me with the dishes. "And you're going to be the most spoiling grandmother in the world." My heart filled with hope. Life was moving forward, and I had so much to live for. But then, 14 months ago, everything changed. Marcus lost his job. The company he worked for closed its operations in our city and moved everything to another region. He came to my house that afternoon with a defeated look, his eyes red from crying. "Mom, I was laid off," he told me, his voice cracking. "I don't know what I'm going to do. I have debts, the apartment rent, Tiffany's expenses." I hugged him close, just like when he was a boy, and I said, "Don't you worry, my love. I'm right here. We'll get through this together." And that is how my ordeal began, though at the time I called it a mother's love. Marcus and Tiffany moved into my house 2 weeks after he lost his job. "It'll only be temporary, Mom," Marcus assured me as they brought in their suitcases, "just until I get another job and we can stabilize." I was happy to help them. After all, what good was my $8,000 monthly pension if it wasn't to support my son during difficult times? My house had 3 bedrooms, so there was plenty of space. I gave them the master bedroom, the one Richard and I had shared. I moved into the smallest one. "You two are young and need room," I told them with a smile. Tiffany thanked me with a kiss on the cheek, but there was something about the gesture that felt hollow, mechanical, as if she were acting for an invisible audience. The first few days were pleasant. We cooked together. I taught Tiffany a few traditional recipes that Marcus had loved since childhood. She seemed interested, taking notes, asking questions. "Mrs. Jenkins, you are so generous," she'd say while stirring the pot. "Not every mother would do what you're doing for her son." Those words filled me with pride. I thought we were finally building a mother-daughter relationship, but small details began to bother me. Tiffany would check the kitchen cabinets and comment on what was missing. "We should buy new dinnerware. This is too old," she'd say, pointing to the plates Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary. Or she'd walk into my room without knocking, claiming she needed something from the closet that they had mistakenly left there. Marcus spent his days sending out resumes and going to interviews. I gave him money for gas so he could dress well, so he could buy a coffee while he waited. "Thanks, Mom," he'd say, taking the bills. "I promise I'll pay you back every penny when I find a job." Weeks passed, and the interviews didn't pan out. Marcus's frustration was obvious. He came home quieter and more distant each day. Tiffany became the one who spoke for both of them. "Mrs. Jenkins, Marcus is very stressed," she explained softly. "The constant rejection is really affecting him emotionally. He needs to feel like he can still provide for his family." Then she suggested something that seemed reasonable to me at the time. "Why don't you give Marcus your debit card? That way he can manage the household expenses and feel useful while he looks for work." I hesitated for a moment. It was my money, my pension earned from 42 years of hard work. But I looked at my son sitting on the sofa with a vacant stare, and my heart broke. I wanted to help him regain his dignity. "All right," I said finally. "Marcus can handle the money while he's here." I gave him my card and explained my PIN. "Use what you need, son, for food, for your expenses, for whatever." Marcus hugged me tight, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a smile on his face. "Thank you, Mom. You don't know what this means to me." Tiffany smiled too, but her smile was different. There was a gleam in her eyes that I didn't interpret then. Now I know it was the gleam of victory. The first few weeks, everything seemed normal. Marcus went to the grocery store and brought home the shopping. He paid the household bills promptly. He even gave me $100 for my personal expenses. "Here, Mom, buy yourself something nice," he said affectionately. I felt relieved. My son was responsible. He was managing the money well. But then the subtle changes began. The grocery trips started getting smaller. "Everything's so expensive, Mom," Marcus explained. "We have to economize until I get a job." It made sense, so I didn't question it. We stopped buying fresh meat and fish. Fruit disappeared from the pantry. "Canned vegetables and instant noodles are cheaper and last longer," Tiffany said while preparing dinner. I nodded, trying to be understanding of the situation. But something strange was happening. While we ate meager rations, Tiffany always had bags from expensive stores in her room. One day, I saw her trying on an emerald dress that surely cost several $100s. "A friend gave it to me," she quickly explained when she noticed me looking. It didn't fit her anymore, and she knew it was my size. Marcus also started wearing new clothes, shoes that shined, designer shirts, a watch I hadn't seen before. "A friend lent them to me for the interviews," he explained when I asked. "You have to look sharp to get a job." His explanations always sounded logical, reasonable. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. 3 months passed, and Marcus still hadn't found employment. One day I tried to check my bank account online to see how much money was left, but the password had been changed. "Marcus," I called out with concern, "I can't get into my bank account." He came into the living room with a calm expression. "Oh, that, Mom? I changed the password for security. There's a lot of fraud now. He gave me a new password, but when I tried to use it, it didn't work either. Just let me handle it, Mom, he said, taking my phone from my hands. You don't really understand these technology things. I'll take care of it. And so, slowly, I lost access to my own money, to my own life. The following months were like falling into a dark well I couldn't climb out of. Each day was a little worse than the last, but the changes were so gradual that I didn't realize how deep I'd fallen until it was too late. Marcus and Tiffany had completely appropriated my house, my money, and my life. And I, like a fool, kept justifying their every action because they were my family, because Marcus was my son, because a mother's love knows no bounds, right? But I was about to discover that some loves destroy you while you smile and say thank you. One day, I walked into the living room and noticed the sofa was missing, the beautiful velvet couch Richard and I had bought for our 20th anniversary. "Where's the sofa?" I asked, confused. Tiffany was painting her nails at the dining table. She didn't even look up. "We sold it," she replied casually. "It was old and worn out. Besides, we needed the money for more important things." My heart pounded. More important things? What things? Marcus appeared from the kitchen with a beer in his hand. "Mom, don't worry about those details. I'm taking care of everything." But I was worried. That sofa held memories, history, meaning. "Marcus, that sofa belonged to your father and me. You didn't have the right to sell it without asking me." My son looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, cold, distant. "Mom, you're living in the past. They're just material things. Dad's gone, and holding on to old furniture won't bring him back." His words hurt more than a slap. I tried to protest, but Tiffany intervened with a saccharine voice. "Mrs. Jenkins, Marcus is right. You need to let go of the past and think about the future. Plus, we live here too, and we have a right to make decisions about the home." A right in my own house. I wanted to scream that it was my house, my money, my memories, but the words got trapped in my throat. I was scared. Scared that if I confronted them, they would leave and I'd be completely alone. And the loneliness terrified me more than anything else in the world. So I swallowed my tears, nodded, and went to my room, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The following week, the dining table disappeared, then the antique lamps I'd inherited from my mother, then the living room television, though, strangely, they had a new, giant, flat-screen TV in their room. "I got it on sale," Marcus explained when I asked. Every time I objected to something, the answer was the same. "Mom, trust me, I know what I'm doing." But I no longer trusted him. I started having nightmares where my house was completely empty, and I walked through rooms that echoed with every step. The worst part was that those nightmares were becoming reality. My diet also drastically worsened. Food portions became smaller and smaller. "Mom, at your age, you don't need to eat so much," Tiffany would say as she served me barely half a cup of instant noodles and a few crackers. "Besides, didn't you want to lose weight? I'm doing you a favor." I didn't want to lose weight. I had a healthy weight for my age and build, but Marcus supported his wife in everything. "Tiffany took an online course in nutrition," he informed me proudly. "She knows what's best for you." She hadn't studied nutrition. I would discover that later. It was just another lie in a mounting pile of lies. While I ate instant noodles and crackers once a day, they ordered takeout almost every night. The aroma of pizza, burgers, and Chinese food filled the house and made my stomach ache with hunger. "Well, we're younger, and we need more energy," Tiffany explained without the slightest trace of shame on her face. I began losing weight rapidly. My clothes hung loose on me. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the emaciated woman staring back. I had deep, dark circles, pale skin, and shaky hands. My friends from the hospital, the few who still visited, were worried. "Vivian, are you sick?" asked Evelyn, my best friend of 30 years. "You look so thin. Are you eating properly?" I opened my mouth to tell her the truth, to ask for help, but at that moment, Tiffany entered the room with a radiant smile. "Mrs. Jenkins is perfectly fine. She's just on a healthy diet, right, mother-in-law?" She looked at me with eyes that promised consequences if I said anything different. I nodded weakly. Yes, I'm fine. Just taking care of myself a little. Evelyn didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. When she left, I felt lonelier than ever. One day, I tried to withdraw money from the ATM with the card Marcus had returned to me for emergencies. I needed to buy my blood pressure medication. The machine rejected the transaction. Insufficient funds. Impossible. It was the middle of the month. There should have been at least $4,000 in the account. I tried again. Same message. With trembling hands, I requested a printed balance. The number on the paper left me breathless. $37. $37 from an $8,000 monthly pension. Where was the rest? I got home with the crumpled paper in my hand and looked for Marcus. He was in the yard talking on the phone, laughing about something. When he saw me, he ended the call quickly. Marcus, I need to talk to you, I said, my voice shaking, showing him the bank slip. There are only $37 left in my account. Where is my money? His expression changed from surprise to annoyance in a second. Mom, you went to the bank without telling me? We talked about this. I managed the money so you don't have to worry. But I need to know where it is. It's $8,000 and there are only $37 left. What did you spend it all on? Marcus sighed as if he were dealing with a spoiled child. Food, bills, household expenses. Do you think everything is free? Electricity, water, gas, internet. It all costs money, Mom. But it couldn't cost almost $8,000. The utility bills totaled maybe $500 a month. What about the other $7,500? Marcus, the bills don't add up to more than $500, I insisted, trying to stay calm even though my heart was pounding. Where is the other money? My son looked at me with an expression of annoyance that chilled my blood. Mom, there's also food to pay for, gas for my interviews, clothes to look presentable. Or do you want me to go looking for a job in rags? His tone was defensive, almost aggressive. He had never spoken to me like that. But son, I'm not seeing that food. We barely have instant noodles in the house, and you've been here for 6 months without getting a job. Don't you think it's time we looked for another solution? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. I watched Marcus's face darken. Tiffany appeared at that moment as if she had been listening behind the door. Another solution? Tiffany repeated in a dangerously soft voice. What are you implying, Mrs. Jenkins? That you want to kick us out? Your own son? Her words sounded hurt, but her eyes gleamed with something darker. Malice. Calculation. No, that's not it, I rushed to explain. I just want to understand what's happening with my money. I have a right to know. Marcus took a step toward me. You have a right, he said slowly, but you also have an obligation to help your family. Or are we not your family anymore? After everything I did for you, after taking care of you when Dad died, now you're going to deny me your support? His argument was absurd. He hadn't taken care of me when Richard died. I had been the one who took care of myself, who worked double shifts to avoid thinking about the pain, who kept going because I had to be strong. But I didn't say anything. I just stood there, holding that bank slip as if it were evidence in a trial where I was the accused. Marcus is right, Tiffany added, stepping closer to her husband and taking his arm. You're being selfish, Mrs. Jenkins. We're going through a difficult time, and instead of supporting us, you're questioning us. Do you know what that does to Marcus? It's hurting him emotionally. The word selfish echoed in my head like a bell. Me? Selfish? I, who had given my whole life to my son, who paid for his college, who supported his every decision, who opened my house and gave him total access to my money? I was the selfish one? Tears began to stream down my cheeks. I'm sorry, I whispered. I didn't mean to. I'm just confused. Marcus sighed and patted me on the shoulder, the way you console a dog. It's okay, Mom. I know you're old, and it's hard for you to understand how things work now. That's why it's better if I handle everything. You just rest and don't worry about the money. I went to my room feeling small, ashamed, and guilty. They had made me feel like I was the problem. The following weeks were even worse. I realized I no longer had control over anything in my own life. I couldn't access my bank account. I couldn't even buy a package of crackers without asking for permission. Marcus controlled every single penny. One day, I asked him for $20 to buy a birthday gift for Evelyn. $20, he repeated, as if I had asked for a fortune. Mom, we don't have money for unnecessary expenses. Evelyn will understand. But it wasn't unnecessary to me. Evelyn had been my friend for 30 years. She had been by my side when Richard died. I deserved at least one birthday gift. Please, Marcus, just $20. My son looked at me with that fed-up expression that was becoming more and more frequent. No, Mom. And don't push it because you're stressing me out. Do you know how hard it is for me to be out of work? And on top of that, I have to deal with your demands. I stopped seeing my friends, not because I didn't want to, but because I was ashamed for them to see me like this, thin, haggard, without a dime in my pocket. What was I going to tell them? That my own son had taken everything from me? When Evelyn called, I made up excuses. I'm tired. I don't feel well. Another time. Eventually, she stopped calling as often. I was isolating myself from the world and didn't even realize that was exactly what Marcus and Tiffany wanted. A victim without witnesses is easier to control. The house grew emptier and emptier. Framed photographs disappeared from the walls. I sold them on an app, Tiffany explained. The antique frames are in style, and they paid well. They were photos from my wedding, Marcus's baptism, family Christmases, irreplaceable memories reduced to cash I never saw. The Persian rugs I'd inherited from my grandmother were taken. They were full of dust mites, was the excuse. The paintings Richard had done as a hobby took up too much space. Every object that disappeared took with it a piece of my history, my identity. I was being erased from my own life, one object at a time. My health visibly deteriorated. In addition to the weight loss, I began to have constant dizziness. My blood pressure medication had run out weeks ago, and I didn't have the money to buy more. Marcus, I need to go to the doctor, I told him one morning after almost fainting in the bathroom. I feel so weak. My son didn't even look up from his phone. Doctors are too expensive, Mom. Besides, you're a nurse. You can take care of yourself. It was a twisted logic. Yes, I was a nurse, but I was retired and sick. I needed professional medical attention. But my medication, I tried to explain. I already told you there's no money for that. He cut me off with finality. Learn to manage yourself better. Manage myself? I didn't have access to a single cent. How was I supposed to manage what I didn't have? One night, I woke up with my stomach growling from hunger. I hadn't eaten anything all day except a little hard bread in the morning. I got up and went to the kitchen, hoping to find something, anything. The pantry was practically empty. There was only one can of tuna and a package of crackers. I took the can with trembling hands and looked for the can opener. I was about to open it when I heard Tiffany's voice behind me. "What are you doing?" I was so startled I almost dropped the can. "I'm hungry," I said, my voice barely audible. Tiffany snatched the can from my hands. "This is for Marcus's lunch tomorrow. He needs protein to stay strong during interviews. You already ate dinner." But I hadn't eaten dinner. They had ordered Chinese food and hadn't offered me anything. I stood there watching Tiffany put the can on a high shelf I couldn't reach, and I felt like a prisoner in my own house, because that's exactly what I was, a prisoner. The days blurred into a fog of hunger, weakness, and despair. I lost track of time. How long had Marcus and Tiffany been living with me? 6 months? 8? A year? I didn't know. Everything blended together in my mind, confused by malnutrition. The only thing I knew for sure was that I was losing the will to fight. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just a useless old woman who didn't understand how the modern world worked. Maybe I deserved this. Those dark thoughts took over more and more frequently. I was giving up on myself. But then something happened that would change everything. My brother Ray decided to pay me a surprise visit from Chicago. Ray and I had always been close despite the distance. He had moved to Chicago 15 years ago for work and built his life there, but we always kept in touch. We talked on the phone at least once a month, though I must admit that in recent months I had avoided his calls. I didn't want him to hear my weak voice or ask questions I didn't know how to answer. When I didn't pick up, he'd leave messages. "Sis, are you okay? You have me worried. Call me." But I never returned his calls. Marcus was always nearby, listening, controlling. I didn't dare say anything that might upset him. Ray tried to contact Marcus directly. "Your uncle is asking about you," my son would tell me in a bored tone after hanging up. I told him you're fine, just busy. But Ray wasn't stupid. My younger brother, 5 years my junior, had always been sharp. He worked as an accountant for a major firm and had a knack for detecting when the numbers didn't add up. And something about this whole situation wasn't adding up for him. After 2 months of not being able to speak to me directly, Ray made a decision. Without telling anyone, he bought a plane ticket and came to visit. When he knocked on the door that Thursday afternoon, I was lying in my room too weak to get up. Marcus opened the door and found him standing there with a small suitcase and a determined expression. "Uncle Ray?" I heard Marcus's surprised voice from the living room. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see my sister," Ray replied firmly. "Is she home?" There was an awkward silence. I wanted to get up, to go greet him, but my body wouldn't respond. I had gone 3 days eating practically nothing, and the dizziness was constant. "Yes, she's here, but she's resting," Marcus said. "She's been a little delicate lately." "Perfect then. I came at the right time," Ray countered, and I heard his steps entering the house. "Which room is she in?" Marcus tried to stop him, but my brother was already walking down the hall, opening doors. When he opened my bedroom door and saw me, his face completely transformed. I saw the shock, the horror, the disbelief in his eyes. "Vivian," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe the skeletal woman lying in that bed was his sister. I sat up with difficulty. "Ray?" I tried to smile. "What a surprise!" But my voice came out broken, barely a whisper. My brother walked into the room and knelt by my bed. He took my hand, and I could see his eyes fill with tears as he felt how thin I was, how fragile my bones were beneath the skin. "My God, sis, what happened to you?" he asked, his voice trembling. You're malnourished. You look like—" He didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what he was going to say. I looked like a terminal patient. I looked like someone on the verge of death. "I'm fine," I lied by reflex. "I've just been a little sick." Ray shook his head slowly, without letting go of my hand. "No, Vivian, this isn't a little sick. This is serious. Very serious." He stood up and left the room. I followed him with my gaze, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. Ray had come. Someone had finally come. My brother walked through the house, and I could hear his footsteps, his muffled exclamations of surprise. When he returned to my room, his expression was one of complete disbelief. "Vivian, where is your furniture? Your house is practically empty. There's no sofa in the living room, no table in the dining room. The walls are bare. What happened here?" Marcus appeared in the doorway with Tiffany glued to his side. "Uncle, we're in the process of renovating," he explained softly, using that voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "We sold some old furniture to buy more modern things later." Ray turned to him with a look I'd never seen before. "Renovation? Your mother is lying on a mattress with no sheets in a room with no heat, and you call this renovation?" Indeed, my bed only had a mattress with a thin blanket. I didn't even have a pillow. I had been sleeping with a rolled-up towel under my head. "Uncle, you're exaggerating," Marcus said, but his voice sounded less sure. Ray ignored him. He turned to me. "Sis, when did you last eat?" The question caught me by surprise. "This morning," I lied, but Ray knew me too well. He walked to the kitchen, and I heard him open the pantry and the refrigerator. He returned with a face flushed with contained anger. "There is no food in this house, Vivian. Absolutely nothing. Just 1 can of tuna and a package of expired crackers." How have you been eating?" I couldn't answer. Tears started rolling down my cheeks. Ray knelt beside me again, and in a very gentle voice, as if speaking to someone wounded, he asked, "Sis, why are you starving? You have an $8,000 a month pension. You should be living comfortably. Where is your money?" Before I could answer, Marcus emerged from his room. He must have been listening to the entire conversation. He crossed his arms, and with an expression that mixed pride and defiance, he declared loudly and clearly, "I give all her money to my wife. She manages it better than Mom. Mom is old and doesn't understand modern finance. Tiffany has an investment plan to grow that money. It's for the good of everyone." The silence that followed was absolute. Ray stood completely motionless, staring at Marcus as if he had just confessed a crime. I felt as if ice water had been dumped over me. My son had proudly admitted that he was taking all my money. Tiffany appeared next to Marcus, taking his arm with a satisfied look. "It's true, Mr. Thompson. I'm intelligently investing Mrs. Jenkins' money. She gave it to us voluntarily to manage." Ray stood up very slowly. I saw his jaw clench, his hands clench into fists, but when he spoke, his voice was dangerously calm. "So you give all her money to your wife," he repeated, looking Marcus directly in the eyes. "And your mother is here, starving to death in her own home, while you and your wife keep her full pension." "It's not how it sounds, Uncle," Marcus began to say, but Ray raised a hand to silence him. "Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses." He turned to Tiffany. "And you say you're investing my sister's money? In what exactly? Because from what I see, it's not in food, it's not in medication, and it's not in keeping this house in decent condition." Tiffany opened her mouth to reply, but Ray continued. "In fact, I want to see those supposed investments. I want to see bank statements, documents, proof of where every penny of the $8,000 my sister receives each month is. And I want to see it now." Marcus and Tiffany exchanged a quick glance, and in that moment, I knew the truth. There were no investments, no financial plan, just theft, abuse, and manipulation. My brother knew it too. I saw his expression shift from controlled anger to something much colder and more calculated. Ray slowly took off his coat, carefully folded it, and placed it on my bed. Then he took his cell phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. "Ethan," he said when someone answered. "It's Ray. I need you to come to my sister Vivian's house immediately. Bring your recorder and your camera, and if you can, bring a doctor too." Ethan was our family's lawyer for years, a serious, meticulous man who had handled our parents' will and some legal matters for Ray and me. I saw Marcus go pale. "Uncle Ray, what are you doing?" he asked in a sharp voice. "This is a private family matter." Ray ended the call and turned to Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're right, Marcus. It's a family matter. A very serious family matter called financial elder abuse. And when Ethan gets here, we're going to document every cent you've stolen, every piece of furniture you've sold, every meal you denied your mother, everything." The word stolen hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus tried to protest, Tiffany tried to explain, but Ray wasn't listening to them anymore. He sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand. "Sis," he said softly, "this is over. Today, it all ends." Marcus started pacing the room, running his hands through his hair nervously. "Uncle Ray, I think you're misinterpreting the whole situation," he said with a trembling voice. "Mom gave us permission to manage her money. She wanted to help us. Tell him, Mom. Tell him you agreed to everything." All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of that moment, the importance of what I was about to say. For months, I had justified, forgiven, and stayed silent. But as I looked at my son's pleading eyes and then at my brother's firm, loving eyes, something broke inside me, something I had been holding back for too long. "I gave you my card for temporary expenses," I said, my voice weak but clear. "I didn't give you permission to empty my account every month. I didn't give you permission to sell my furniture. I didn't give you permission to leave me to starve in my own house." The words came out like a torrent I could no longer stop. "I gave you my card because you were my son and you were in trouble. Because I trusted you. Because I never imagined you would do this to me. I changed my entire life for you, Marcus. I worked double shifts to pay for your college. I gave up a social life to be with you when you were a child. I gave you everything I had, everything I was. And you repaid me by stealing my dignity. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Tiffany stepped forward. Mrs. Jenkins, you're confused. Age sometimes makes us remember things incorrectly. But Ray interrupted her with a cutting voice. Don't try to call her senile. My sister is perfectly lucid, and you just heard her testimony. Ray stood up and walked toward Marcus. While we wait for Ethan, we're going to do a little exercise. You say Tiffany is investing your mother's money. Fine, show me. Open your phone and show me the investment apps, the bank statements, the certificates, whatever. Marcus took a step back. I don't have to show you anything. You're not the police. You're right. I'm not the police, Ray replied with chilling calm. But they will arrive soon if you don't cooperate. Because what you've done to your mother is not only immoral, it's illegal. It's called financial exploitation of the elderly, and it's a federal crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison. I saw the color completely drain from Marcus's face. Tiffany, on the other hand, maintained her composure, though I could see a flash of panic in her eyes. This is ridiculous, Tiffany said, her voice tight. We haven't committed any crime. Marcus is Mrs. Jenkins's son. Children have a right to receive help from their parents. Help? Yes, Ray countered. Theft? No. And there's a very clear difference between asking for help and appropriating every cent your mother-in-law receives while leaving her without food and medication. He turned to me. Sis, when was the last time you took your blood pressure medicine? Almost 2 months ago, I admitted. Marcus said there was no money to buy them. Ray closed his eyes for a moment, as if containing an explosion of fury. There was no money for medication that cost $30 a month, but there was money for... He looked around the empty room. For what exactly? Where is the money, Marcus? My son sank to the floor, sitting against the wall with his hands covering his face. We spent it, he mumbled. You spent it? Ray repeated. $8,000 a month for how many months, Vivian? 14 months, I answered. They've lived here 14 months. Ray took out his phone and quickly did the math. $112,000. You spent $112,000 of your mother's money in 14 months. On what? Marcus didn't answer. It was Tiffany who spoke, and for the first time since I'd known her, her voice sounded genuinely scared. We had expenses. The rent for the apartment, which we still had for the first year, credit card debts, the car. What apartment? Ray asked. Marcus and Tiffany live here. We were still paying the lease for the old apartment, Tiffany quickly explained. We moved out before the lease was up, and we had to keep paying until it expired. Ray looked at her with disbelief. And it didn't occur to you to sublet? To find someone to occupy the space? Or was it just more convenient to use my sister's money to pay for 2 residences while she slept on a mattress without sheets? Tiffany had no answer for that. The credit card debts, Ray continued. How much are we talking about? $20,000, Marcus mumbled from the floor. $20,000, Ray repeated. And how did you accumulate $20,000 in debt? Silence was the answer, but I knew the truth. I had seen it with my own eyes over those months, the expensive clothes they wore, the high-end restaurants they brought leftovers from, Marcus's new watch shining on his wrist, the designer bags Tiffany collected, the weekend trips they took while I stayed home alone. All of it had been with my money. The doorbell rang and Ray went to open it. Ethan Cole walked in with his professional briefcase and a serious expression. He was a man in his 50s, gray-haired, wearing glasses, and possessed that quiet, authoritative presence of a good lawyer. Behind him came a woman I didn't recognize. She carried a medical bag. Vivian, Ethan said, approaching my bed with obvious concern. Ray explained a little over the phone, but my God! He didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. My appearance spoke for itself. The doctor, who introduced herself as Dr. Shirley Davis, approached and began to examine me. She took my blood pressure, listened to my heart, and checked my eyes and mouth. Her expression grew graver with each passing second. "Mrs. Jenkins, you are severely malnourished," she said in a professional but worried voice. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high. You show signs of dehydration, and your BMI indicates severe malnutrition. You need immediate medical attention." "Did you hear that?" Ray said, looking at Marcus and Tiffany. "Severe malnutrition in a house that brings in $8,000 a month." Ethan pulled a recorder from his briefcase. "With your permission, Vivian, I'm going to record this conversation. It's important to document everything that has happened." I nodded weakly. Ethan turned on the recorder and began. "It is Thursday, February 22nd, 4:30 in the afternoon. Present in the residence of Mrs. Vivian Jenkins are Mrs. Jenkins, her brother Raymond Thompson, her son Marcus Jenkins, her daughter-in-law Tiffany Mills, attorney Ethan Cole, and Dr. Shirley Davis." He looked at Marcus and Tiffany. "I'm going to ask you some questions, and I strongly recommend that you answer honestly. Everything you say will be recorded and may be used in future legal proceedings." Marcus stood up, trembling. We didn't do anything wrong. My mother gave us her money voluntarily." "Voluntarily?" Ethan asked skeptically. "Did you ask your mother if she agreed to be left without food, without medication, without furniture?" "She could ask for anything she needed," Tiffany intervened defensively. "It's not our fault if she didn't ask." "She didn't ask." Ray's voice sounded like thunder. "My sister asked you for $20 to buy her best friend a birthday gift, and Marcus denied her. She asked you for money for her medication, and you denied her. How dare you say she didn't ask?" Ethan raised a hand to calm the tension. "Marcus, Tiffany, I need you to hand over all bank statements for the last 14 months. I need to see exactly where every cent of the $112,000 you received from Vivian's pension went." "We don't have to give you anything," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Technically, no," Ethan admitted. "But if you don't cooperate voluntarily, I will file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office tonight for financial elder abuse, misappropriation, and possibly fraud. And then it will be federal investigators reviewing your accounts with a court order, and I assure you they are much less kind than I am." I saw Marcus and Tiffany look at each other, communicating silently. Finally, Tiffany sighed. "All right, we'll show you the statements." She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and started opening apps. Ray and Ethan moved closer to look at the screen. What they saw left them silent for a long moment. Then Ray whispered, "My God." "What?" I asked in a weak voice. "What did you see?" Ray turned to me with a look of absolute disbelief. "Sis, there are transfers from your account to a business account in Tiffany Mills's name." "A business account? She opened a business with your money." Ray's words fell on me like stones. A business. Tiffany had opened a business with my money. My pension, earned from 42 years of working as a nurse. Endless night shifts, patients I had cared for with my own hands. All that sacrifice had been used to fund the business of the woman who was starving me. "What kind of business?" Ethan asked in a controlled voice while taking notes in a notebook. Tiffany didn't answer. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Her former confidence had completely disappeared. It was Marcus who spoke, his voice barely audible. "A clothing consignment shop. Tiffany always wanted to have her own store." "A consignment shop," Ray repeated slowly, as if processing something incomprehensible. "You left your mother without food, without medication, without furniture, selling her family memories, so your wife could fulfill her dream of owning a clothing store." "It wasn't like that," Tiffany protested, looking up for the first time, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was going to pay her back all the money when the business started generating profits. It was a temporary investment." "An investment?" Ethan's voice was dangerously smooth. "Did you ask Vivian for permission to invest her entire pension in your personal business?" Tiffany shook her head. "Marcus said she would agree, that she would understand." "Marcus said?" Ethan repeated, meticulously writing it down. But you never directly asked Vivian if you could use her money to open a business in your name? No, Tiffany admitted, her voice cracking. Ethan turned to Marcus. And did you tell your mother that you were using her entire pension to finance your wife's business? Marcus didn't answer. His silence was all the response we needed. Ray started reviewing more details on Tiffany's phone, scrolling with an increasingly dark expression. Here's a $3,000 transfer for initial inventory, another $2,500 for store renovations, $100 for logo design and branding, $4,000 for imported merchandise. With every figure he mentioned, I felt as if needles were being stuck into my heart. And here, Ray continued, are personal purchases: an $800 dress, $600 shoes, a $1,200 bag, dinners at restaurants costing $200, $300 a night. He turned to Tiffany with a look of absolute contempt. While my sister ate instant noodles once a day, you spent $1,200 on a purse? Tiffany began to weep openly. I needed to look good for the business. Clients judge by appearance. If I didn't look successful, no one would buy from my store. And my mother? I asked, my voice barely recognizable as mine, a voice filled with a pain so deep it seemed to come from the center of the earth. She didn't need to look good? She didn't need to eat? She didn't need her medication? Tiffany couldn't look me in the eyes. I thought, Marcus said you had savings, that you had other accounts. I laughed. It was a bitter, broken laugh that hurt my chest. Other savings? Where would I have other savings? I spent all my savings on Marcus's college, on his wedding, on helping you when you needed it. My pension was all I had, and you knew it. Ethan continued reviewing the phone, now with a tablet where he was making calculations. According to what I'm seeing here, of the $112,000 that entered this house in 14 months, approximately $93,000 were transferred directly to Tiffany's accounts for her business and personal expenses. $93,000. The figure was so large I couldn't process it. And the other $19,000? Ray asked. Marcus cleared his throat. We paid for the old apartment for 6 months until the lease ended. That was about $1,500 a month. $9,000 total. Then there are the credit card debts we had before moving here. We were paying them off little by little. Little by little with my sister's money while she starved to death. Ray's voice trembled with contained anger. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have the slightest idea? Dr. Davis, who had been taking my vital signs again, intervened. Mr. Thompson, I need to take Mrs. Jenkins to the hospital immediately. Her condition is critical. She needs IV hydration, supervised nutrition, and a full evaluation. If she doesn't receive urgent medical attention, she could suffer multi-organ failure. No, I said firmly, despite my weakness. All eyes turned to me. I'm not going to the hospital until this is resolved. I need to hear everything. I need to know the whole truth. Ray knelt by my bed and took my hand. Sis, you're very sick. I know, I replied, but I've been sick for months and I survived. I can last a few more hours. I need to know what else they hid from me. My brother looked at Dr. Davis, who nodded reluctantly. All right, but no more than 1 hour. After that, I insist on taking her to the hospital, with or without her permission. Ethan took more documents from his briefcase. Marcus, Tiffany, I need you to sign an affidavit admitting that you received Vivian's pension money and how you spent it. This declaration will be used to determine the next legal steps. And if we don't sign? Marcus asked with one last attempt at defiance. Then I immediately proceed with the criminal complaint, Ethan replied without emotion. And believe me, you'll want to resolve this in the civil realm before it becomes a criminal case. Financial elder abuse is a federal crime. We're talking about years in prison, not fines. I watched the color drain from Marcus's face. Tiffany sobbed uncontrollably. We didn't want to hurt her, she cried. We just wanted to get ahead. We just wanted an opportunity. At my sister's expense? Ray asked, his voice harsh. That was your opportunity. To starve a 69-year-old woman? Enough, I said with more strength than I thought I had. I want to ask questions. Everyone fell silent and looked at me. Marcus, my voice trembled, but I needed to know. At any point during these 14 months, did you stop to think about me? When you saw me getting thinner, weaker, when you sold your father's sofa, when you denied me money for medication, did you ever once think, this is wrong? My son couldn't hold my gaze. Tiffany kept saying it was temporary, that everything would be okay soon. Tiffany kept saying? I repeated. Marcus, you're my son. You've known me since the day you were born. I held you in my arms. I fed you when you were hungry. I cared for you when you were sick. And you couldn't see that I was hungry, that I was sick? Tears began to roll down Marcus's face. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Things just spiraled out of control. Every time I wanted to stop, Tiffany would say, just one more month, just a little more money, and then we could pay you back everything with interest. I turned to Tiffany. And your consignment shop? Is it working? Is it generating those profits you were going to use to pay me back my money? Tiffany shook her head through sobs. It went bankrupt 2 months ago. It didn't work. I lost everything. The silence that followed was absolute. It was Ray who spoke. So you not only stole $93,000 from my sister, you lost it. All that money, all that suffering for nothing. Ethan closed his notebook with a dry snap. All right, now that we have all the information, these are the next steps. Marcus and Tiffany will sign an agreement where they acknowledge the $93,000 debt to Vivian. They will establish a payment plan that will be legally supervised. Additionally, you will vacate this house immediately. Immediately? Marcus asked in a sharp voice. Where are we going to go? That's not my problem, Ethan replied coldly. You should have thought about that before you stole from your mother. You have 2 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave the property. If you don't do so voluntarily, I will call the police and have you removed by force. Marcus looked at Ray, pleading. Uncle, please, we're family. Ray looked at him with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It was deep disappointment, sadness, and something that looked like pity. Family doesn't do this, Marcus. What you two did is unspeakable. Marcus tried to approach me, but Ray stepped between us. No, my brother said firmly. You've done enough damage. My son stopped, his hand stretched out toward me in a gesture of supplication. Mom, please forgive me. I love you. I know I made a terrible mistake, but I'm still your son. You can't leave me out on the street. His words should have moved me. For 69 years, Marcus had been my reason for living, my purpose, my everything. But as I watched him standing there, crying and pleading, I felt something I never thought I would feel for my own son. Nothing. The love I had felt for him all my life had evaporated, consumed by months of hunger, humiliation, and betrayal. You left me to starve in my own house, I said, my voice broken but firm. I didn't leave you on the street. I gave you a roof, food, all my money, and you decided that my life was worth less than a clothing shop. Mom, I can fix it, Marcus insisted, desperate. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back every cent. Just give me a chance. A chance? I repeated with a bitter laugh. I gave you 14 months of chances. Every day I woke up hungry. Every night I shivered from the cold because you had sold my blankets. Every time I asked you for something, and you denied me. Those were opportunities for you to do the right thing, and you never did. Tiffany also approached, falling to her knees in front of me. Mrs. Jenkins, I know what we did was wrong, terribly wrong, but please don't leave us with nothing. Marcus won't survive on the street. He's your only son, your only family. I am her family, Ray intervened, his voice harsh. I'm the one who came to save her when her only son was slowly killing her. He turned to Tiffany with contempt. And you have no right to ask for anything. You orchestrated all of this. You convinced Marcus to steal from his own mother to fund your business fantasies. That's not true, Tiffany protested weakly. Marcus also wanted the business. He agreed to everything. Marcus looked at her with an expression of betrayal. What? No. You were the one who insisted on using my mother's money. You said it was just a loan, that she would never know, because we would pay it back before she realized. You never stopped me, Tiffany screamed, standing up. You spent that money too. You bought expensive clothes and ate at fancy restaurants while your mother starved. And there it was, the ugly, naked truth. They were blaming each other, destroying their own marriage right before my eyes. A part of me should have felt satisfied watching their relationship crumble, but I only felt a deep, painful emptiness. This was my son, the baby I had held in my arms, the child who had told me I was the best mom in the world, the young man I had been so proud of. At what point had he become this stranger capable of such cruel crimes? Ethan slammed his fist on the table, silencing the argument. Enough. I don't care who had the idea or who is more guilty. You are both equally responsible under the law. Now, you will sign these documents or I will call the police. Decide. He pulled several papers from his briefcase and placed them on the only table remaining in the room. Marcus and Tiffany approached slowly, reading the documents with expressions of defeat. This says we have to pay $1,500 a month until the debt is completely covered, Marcus read, his voice trembling. That's more than 5 years of payments. You should consider yourself lucky, Ethan replied without sympathy. The alternative is jail. And believe me, you won't be able to pay a single cent in there. But I don't have a job, Marcus protested. How am I going to pay $1,500 a month without a job? That's your problem, not mine, Ethan said. You'll get a job. 2 jobs if necessary, 3, I don't care. But you will pay every cent you stole from your mother. Tiffany took the pen with a trembling hand. And if we can't pay 1 month, what happens then? Then the agreement is automatically nullified and I proceed with criminal charges, Ethan explained. This document is your only opportunity to avoid prison. I suggest you take it seriously. I watched Marcus and Tiffany exchange desperate glances. Finally, both of them signed the documents. Ethan reviewed them carefully, ensuring every page was signed and correctly dated. Good, he said, putting the documents back into his briefcase. Now, according to the terms you just signed, you have 2 hours to vacate this property. You can only take your personal belongings. Nothing that belongs to Vivian, none of the furniture, even if there are only 3 chairs and a table left, none of the appliances. Just your clothes and personal items. Marcus looked around the nearly empty house with a lost expression. Where are we going to go? You can go with friends, with family, find a shelter, rent something, Ray replied. It's not my problem. You should have thought of that before. Tiffany started walking toward her room, sobbing. Marcus followed her with slow, defeated steps. As they packed, I heard their voices arguing in the room, blaming each other, crying. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for them, but every time that feeling started to surface, I remembered the nights of hunger, the dizziness from lack of food, the humiliation of having to beg for $20 and being denied. I remembered watching them eat while my stomach growled. I remembered every small cruelty, every lie, every moment they chose their comfort over my survival. No, I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt justice. Ray sat next to me and took my hand. Sis, when they leave, I'll take you straight to the hospital. Dr. Davis says you need at least 9 days of hospitalization to stabilize. I don't want to stay here afterward, I whispered. This house has too many bad memories now. I know, Ray replied softly. That's why, when you get out of the hospital, you're coming to live with me in Chicago, at least temporarily until you fully recover. Afterward, if you want to come back here, we'll renovate your house, we'll fill it with life again, but first, you need to heal. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Thank you, Ray. If you hadn't come, that— Hush, he interrupted me. I'm always going to be here for you. You're my sister. I should have come sooner. I should have pushed harder when you didn't answer my calls. I feel guilty for not realizing what was happening. It's not your fault, I said, squeezing his hand. They were very careful. Every time I tried to ask for help, Marcus was nearby. Every time someone called, he answered and said I was fine. He systematically isolated me. Ethan, who had been reviewing more documents, looked up. Vivian, there's something else I need to tell you. When I reviewed the transfers in more detail, I found something concerning. There are several documents that were digitally signed in your name. authorizations for large transfers, changes to insurance beneficiaries, a legal power of attorney. My heart stopped. Power of attorney? I never signed any power of attorney. I know, Ethan said with a grave expression. That's why I'll need you to file a formal complaint for document forgery. Marcus forged your signature on several important legal documents. What documents? I asked, feeling nauseous. A power of attorney that gave Marcus total control over all your accounts and financial decisions. A change in your life insurance policy, where Marcus and Tiffany are now the sole beneficiaries instead of the distribution you previously had between Marcus, Ray, and some charities, and an authorization to sell this house if necessary. The words fell on me like hammer blows. They were going to sell my house. Ethan nodded. There was a preliminary request with a real estate agent dated 3 weeks ago. They were preparing the groundwork to sell it. They probably would have told you it was necessary because of some invented medical or financial emergency. I felt as if the whole world was crumbling around me. They hadn't just robbed me, hadn't just left me to starve. They had planned to take everything, my house, my life insurance, my complete autonomy. They would have left me literally with nothing. And how much would they have gotten for the house? Ray asked, his voice trembling with contained fury. According to the preliminary appraisal they requested, approximately $250,000, Ethan replied. Ray stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward. Marcus! He roared, heading toward the room where my son was packing. Ethan and I followed him, I leaning on the walls because my legs could barely hold me. Ray burst through the door and found Marcus folding clothes into a suitcase. You were going to sell your mother's house, Ray roared. You were going to leave her literally on the street. Marcus paled. We were just exploring options. We never would have done it without her permission. Liar, Ray shouted. You forged her signature on legal documents. You changed her life insurance, all without her knowledge or permission. Marcus started crying again. But these weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic, of someone watching their world fall apart. Uncle, please, I was desperate. Tiffany said we needed more capital to save the business. I thought if we sold the house, we could buy Mom something smaller and use the difference to invest. She was going to be better off, I swear. Better off? I repeated in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. Better off without a roof? Without the house your father and I bought with so much sacrifice? I approached Marcus, each step a monumental effort. Look what you did to me, I said, pointing to my emaciated body. This is what better off means under your care. I weighed 130 pounds when you moved here. Now I weigh 92. You took 38 pounds from me, almost all my strength, my dignity, my will to live, and you were still planning to take more. Marcus fell to his knees in front of me, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I lost my way. I lost sight of what was important. Please give me another chance. I can change. I looked at him for a long moment. I saw the broken man in front of me, but I also saw the child he had been, the son I had loved with every fiber of my being. And in that instant, I made the most difficult decision of my life. No, I said, my voice firm despite the tears rolling down my cheeks. I won't give you another chance. Not because I don't love you, Marcus, but precisely because I love myself. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to choose me. I watched his eyes open in shock, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. For 69 years, I put everyone before myself. Your father, you, my patients, everyone. And when I needed someone to put me first the most, my own son chose money, chose a clothing store, chose his comfort over my life. Mom, please, Marcus pleaded, reaching his hands toward me. I took a step back. It's over. You signed the documents. You will pay your debt, and after that, I don't want to see you again. The words left my mouth with a clarity that surprised me. Marcus froze. Never? You're never going to want to see me again? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Maybe someday, when I've healed, when I can think of you without feeling this pain in my chest. But right now, every time I look at you, I see the months of suffering. I see every lie, every manipulation, every moment you chose to hurt me. I can't have that in my life, not if I want to survive. Ray approached and put his hand on my shoulder, giving me strength. Sis, the doctor insists we have to go to the hospital now. I nodded. Yes, it's time. I turned one last time to Marcus and Tiffany. You have 1 hour to leave. When I return from the hospital, I don't want to find any trace of you here. Tiffany, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mrs. Jenkins, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life regretting what I did. You didn't deserve any of this. I looked her directly in the eyes. You're right. I didn't deserve it, but it happened. And now both of you will have to live with the consequences of your decisions, just as I will have to live with the scars you left me. Ray helped me walk toward the door. Every step was an effort, but it also felt like a step toward freedom. Dr. Davis was waiting for me in the living room with a wheelchair. It's best you don't walk anymore for now, she said with gentle professionalism. I sat in the chair, feeling how frail my body had become. As Ray pushed me toward the exit, I heard Marcus's sobs behind me. I didn't look back. If I looked back, I might break. And I had broken enough already. The hospital was a whirlwind of exams, blood tests, IV fluids, and worried doctors. I was immediately admitted to intensive care. My blood pressure was dangerously high. My kidneys showed signs of damage from prolonged dehydration. I had severe anemia and critical vitamin deficiencies. Mrs. Jenkins, the attending physician told me, a man in his 40s with a grave expression, you arrived just in time. 1 or 2 more weeks in those conditions, and you probably would have suffered multi-organ failure. The words hit me hard. I had been so close to death, so close, and my own son had been the one who led me to that edge. I spent 9 days in the hospital. Ray was with me every day, bringing me flowers, reading me books, simply holding my hand when nightmares woke me up in the middle of the night. Evelyn came to visit me, crying when she saw my condition. Vivian, I should have pushed harder, she said through tears. I saw something was wrong, but I didn't press enough. It's not your fault, I assured her. They were very careful. They systematically isolated me, but now I'm free. During those days in the hospital, Ethan worked tirelessly on my case. He filed a formal complaint for financial elder abuse, document forgery, and misappropriation. He also initiated the process to reverse all the forged documents, the power of attorney, the change in the life insurance, everything. I have good news, he told me during one of his visits. The bank is fully cooperating. They're reviewing every suspicious transaction from the last 14 months. And since we found evidence of signature forgery, it's possible we can recover some of the stolen money. How much? I asked without much hope. It's hard to say. Maybe $20,000 or $30,000. The rest was spent in cash or on the business that already went bankrupt. But something is better than nothing. Ray took care of my house while I was hospitalized. He hired a deep cleaning team, bought new furniture, and stocked the pantry and refrigerator with food. When you return, I want you to find a home, not an empty house full of painful memories, he explained to me. But I had already made a decision. Ray, I want to sell the house, I told him one afternoon while I was being fed through a nasogastric tube because my stomach still couldn't tolerate solid food. It has too many ghosts now. I want to start over somewhere else. My brother nodded understandingly. Where would you like to live? With you, I replied. If you'll have me, I want to go to Chicago, start a new life away from here, away from everything that happened. Ray smiled with tears in his eyes. Nothing would make me happier, sis. My home is your home. That decision filled me with a peace I hadn't felt in months. It was the closure I needed. Marcus tried to visit me at the hospital twice. Both times he was denied entry. I had given specific instructions that I didn't want to see him. He left letters at the reception desk that Ray collected, but that I didn't read. Do you want me to read them to you? My brother asked. No, I replied firmly. Maybe someday, but not now. In the 3rd week after that terrible day, I was medically discharged. I had gained 9 pounds. My vital signs had stabilized, and although I was still weak, the doctors were confident that I would fully recover with time and proper care. Ray took me to my house one last time to pick up some personal belongings before we moved to Chicago. When I walked in, I barely recognized the place. The new furniture, the freshly painted walls, the framed photographs in places of honor. My brother had transformed the empty house into a home again, but I knew it was no longer my home. My home was where I felt safe, valued, and loved. And that place was now next to Ray. I packed only the essentials: photographs of Richard, some memories from when Marcus was a child and still innocent, my nursing certificates, and letters from grateful patients. I left behind everything that tied me to the pain. Ethan took charge of putting the house up for sale and establishing a trust to manage the sale money and the payments Marcus and Tiffany owed me. "You won't have to worry about anything," he assured me. "I'll oversee everything and send you monthly reports." 3 months later, settled in Chicago at Ray's house, I received news. The house had sold for $230,000. With that money and my recovered pension, I had financial security again. Marcus and Tiffany had made their first payment of $1,500, though according to Ethan, they did so just 1 day before the deadline. "It will take them 6 years and 2 months to pay off the full debt if they maintain constant payments," Ethan informed me. "And if they don't pay?" I asked. "Then I proceed with criminal charges, as the agreement stipulates." Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I made new friends in Chicago, women my age who met at a book club Ray helped me find. I started therapy with a psychologist specializing in trauma and family abuse. The sessions were difficult, painful, but necessary. "What you experienced is called financial abuse and extreme neglect," the doctor explained to me during one session. "It's a form of violence as real as physical abuse, and it was not your fault." Those words freed me from the guilt I had been carrying. It hadn't been my fault. I had been the victim, not the one responsible. I gradually gained weight, reaching 128 pounds, a healthy weight for my age and height. My hair, which had started falling out from malnutrition, grew back. The deep wrinkles of worry on my face softened. I started to smile again, to laugh, to live. 1 year after that terrible day when Ray knocked on my door and saved my life, I was sitting on the balcony of his Chicago apartment, drinking hot cocoa and watching the sunrise. The sun painted the sky in coral and gold, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. My phone chimed. It was a message from Ethan. Marcus completed 12 consecutive payments, total paid so far, $18,000, $75,000 remaining. I read it without feeling anything particular, neither satisfaction, nor rage, nor sadness, just acceptance. Marcus was paying his debt, literally and figuratively. There was also a note in the message. "Marcus is asking if he can write you a letter. He says he's in therapy, and part of his recovery process is apologizing appropriately." I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I replied, "He can send the letter. I'll read it when I'm ready." And I meant it. Someday, when my heart was completely healed, maybe I could read his words. Maybe I could even forgive him. But that day hadn't arrived yet, and that was okay. I had all the time in the world. Ray came out onto the balcony with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "What are you thinking about, sis?" he asked, sitting next to me. "I'm smiling about how lucky I am to have you," I replied. "How grateful I am to be alive, and all the beautiful things I still have ahead of me." My brother hugged me. "And I'm grateful you survived, that you're so strong." We sat there, watching the sun finish rising, painting a new day full of possibilities. I had lost a lot: money, furniture, the relationship with my son, the innocence of believing that family love was unconditional. But I had gained something more valuable. I had found myself. I had discovered that I deserved respect, dignity, and love, and that I didn't have to accept abuse from anyone, not even my own blood. The morning breeze caressed my face, and I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time in over a year, I felt free, completely, wonderfully free. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.